Hello and welcome to LSU Focus. It is pre-match build-up showtime with Liverpool taking on West Ham United at the London Stadium on Monday night at 8 o'clock, continuing our quest for our first Premier League title for 29 years. And this game represents the first game in what I think is absolutely a huge month for this Liverpool side. You know, after this, we've got games against Bournemouth. Then I believe we've got the Bayern Munich game, which I think is a really massive game, not only because of the injury problems and suspension problems we've got and how that's going to represent a huge challenge for us against Bayern, but also because it will represent how the season goes in terms of how we prioritise certain trophies and whether we go out of Europe and just focus all out on the league, or whether we do actually try and fight it out on two fronts, on the two biggest fronts possible. And then, of course, we've also got a massive away game against Man United and a home game against Watford. So I think this is the month which will really define where we go between now and the end of the season, and just how difficult the title race is going to be, and whether or not Liverpool are even first in the table come the end of the month. So it's a massive game. And of course, with the one we played against Leicester last time out, the result we got, and I think in particular the performance that we put in, it's so important that we avoid a dip in form, that we show that that was just a blip, that that's not going to happen again, that we will get back to winning ways and winning games with relative ease as well. I think is a very important thing. We don't want to start scraping through games. We scraped through against Palace, and probably, I think it's fair to say, against Brighton as well. So I think what we really need right now is a comfortable Liverpool win. It's what we needed against Leicester. We didn't get it, and we need to get it now, because obviously after the Bournemouth game, it does start to get very difficult in terms of how quickly the games come, and also the quality of opposition we're going to come up against. And also, of course, we are once again playing after Manchester City, and while this was a little bit of a different situation last time against Leicester, because of course City lost against Newcastle, so it was less about, regaining the lead that we already had, and more about, this is almost a free hit, an opportunity to actually extend the lead, an opportunity we certainly did not expect to have at the start of the game week. This time, I think we're all expecting City to get some sort of positive result against Arsenal. Obviously, with it being against Arsenal, another top six side, there's a little bit more optimism there, but I think the smart money is, of course, as always, on Manchester City. So, I think it's going to be interesting to see how Liverpool cope with that pressure. We could end up going into the game in London with only a 2-point gap, and if we do only leave it at 2 points, if we do lose to West Ham and we are in a little bit of a dip in form, then people are going to start to talk, because people are talking already, and I think it's absolutely bizarre that pundits are already kind of jumping on the bandwagon and saying, I'm seeing signs of nervousness from Liverpool here. I'm not sure they can cope with the pressure. I wouldn't say we look nervous against Leicester. I'd say we just looked a bit bad. I don't think we performed badly because the nerves got the better of us, because the pressure of the occasion got to the Liverpool players. I think we just performed badly because sometimes that happens, and at the end of the day we were lucky to get away with a draw. But I think if Liverpool do get a bad result against West Ham, if we don't win, and preferably win comfortably, then people are still going to be talking about whether or not Liverpool can deal with the pressure of being first place in this title race. So team news going into the game, it's not great, let's be honest. I think there's a lot has been made so far this week and for the weeks beforehand about Liverpool's defensive injury situation, and I think it is, and I'm hesitant to use this word, starting to become potentially a bit of a crisis, because not only are we missing quite a few players, we've been missing quite a few players for a while now. The news that came out, I think it was either this morning or yesterday evening in one of Jurgen Klopp's press conferences, was that Joe Gomez is unlikely to be back until at least after the Bayern Munich game, which of course rules him out of this game, the one against Bournemouth next weekend, and then the one against Bayern as well, as I said. So potentially he comes back for the Man United one, although that's only a few days after Bayern as well. There's no time scale has been put on when he's going to return from injury, and obviously, like I said, with the defensive injury problems we have at the moment, we could really do with Joe Gomez coming back, especially because he can cover in multiple areas. So that's obviously a massive blow that we haven't got him available. Dejan Lovren and Trent Alexander-Arnold are also sidelined for this game. Dejan Lovren with a hamstring problem that's been hampering him for quite a few weeks now, I think since he came off against Wolves, and then Trent Alexander-Arnold with the knee injury that he picked up against Brighton. Now, both of these, Jurgen Klopp has suggested that they might be back for the game against Bournemouth. However, the fact that they always seem close but not quite there, to me suggests that I would not put any money on whenever any of them are going to come back. He suggested that Trent will be back in full training after this game, so that is of course a positive sign. Hopefully he continues, his recovery at the current pace he's going at, and we do have him available for the Bournemouth game. But as it stands, we don't have Joe Gomez, we don't have Dejan Lovren, and we don't have Trent Alexander-Arnold for this game against West Ham. So, as for how I think Liverpool are actually going to line up, obviously, Alisson Becker in goal, no questions or arguments there. The centre-back pairing, I think, is probably going to have to be Virgil van Dijk and Joel Matip. We don't really have any other options there. I think if Lovren had been available, I would have 100% backed the idea of him coming in for Matip in the centre of defence, simply because I know Lovren has his detractors, and some people think he's just not good enough for Liverpool, and his brain farts are far too common for us to be able to rely on him, especially in a title race as intense and as difficult as this one. But I think people are also overlooking the fact that Joel Matip is actually prone to a fair few mistakes of his own. If you ask me, he's looked more likely to make an error this season than Dejan Lovren has, either this season or during the second half of last season, when Dejan Lovren was probably in the best form of his Liverpool career so far. So I would have rather seen Lovren. I think Matip performed poorly against Leicester. He's at fault for the goal, I think, and there were multiple times where they got the better of him far too easily. But as it stands, he's going to be playing. The right back is, of course, definitely going to have to be James Milner. He is available. He's next down in the pecking order once you rule out Trent Alexander-Arnold and Joe Gomez. You know, Jordan Henderson was fine there, but I think he is definitely better in midfield, and he is a more important player for Liverpool in midfield so far this season than James Milner has been, although Milner is, of course, a fantastic professional. And I think Rafa Camacho, I'd like to see him. He performed admirably for the 3 minutes he was on the pitch against Crystal Palace. But up against Felipe Anderson, maybe not. Maybe give that one a rest. So Milner at right back, and then Andrew Robertson, of course, in the left back position. The midfield, I think we go with the 4-2-3-1 for this game. I think the 4-3-3 is just a little bit restrictive, even though it is away from home and it's against a side who are a solid attacking side who will probably look to get at us. They probably won't sit off us, so we don't necessarily need to set up to try and break down a low block defence or anything like that. But I think playing a 4-3-3 is just a little bit negative. It's possible we play a midfield 3 and have Keita as a member of that, so if need be, we can always switch to a 4-2-3-1 and Keita becomes part of the attacking unit rather than the more defensive midfield unit. I would quite like to see that, because I think we saw some relatively positive signs from Keita against Leicester. We also saw the things that are still missing from his game that he's going to need to sort out if he is to become a regular Premier League player for Liverpool. But I think he has played a little bit better over maybe the last couple of games or so than we've seen him do so in the past. So maybe Keita gets a game, but I think we go with the 4-2-3-1 certainly from the start. And I think it's Fabinho and Henderson as the midfield pairing. You know, we saw when Fabinho came on against Leicester City just how things instantly clicked that little bit better, how we managed to attack quicker, how the link-up play between the midfield and the attack was so much more fluid. It was just there where it hadn't been earlier on in the game. So I think he definitely has to play this game. And then alongside him, I'd put Henderson, simply because Wijnaldum was a bit touch and go for the game against Leicester. And also I just think Henderson a little bit more defensive. And if West Ham are going to be solid going forward, then we do need something to counteract that. And also Henderson has been very, very solid over the last few games, so I don't see any reason why he doesn't deserve to start in the centre of the park. And then ahead of them, I think you go with Firmino down the middle as the number 10, Shaqiri out on the right, although I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure about that one, because Shaqiri's form has been iffy over the last few games. I think it's fair to say he was pretty much null and void in terms of the effect he had on the game against Leicester. So hopefully we see an upturn in form from him in this game. I'd quite like to see him play, although of course his impact does seem to be a little bit reduced from the bench, reduced when he starts compared to when he comes off the bench. So that's why I can potentially see Keita playing. I think if he comes in, then Shaqiri is the one that drops out. As for the left mid, of course, Sadio Mane, you know, having a pretty decent run of goal scoring form at the moment. And then up top, it has to be the one and only Mohamed Salah. So taking a look at West Ham and how they've been playing over the last few games, then they are actually in probably the worst form they've been in since the start of the season. And when you watch them play, the way they defend, just how wide open they are, how poor their positional play is defensively, reminds me of how bad they were when we played them on the first day of the season, you know, when we put 4 past them and just sliced them open so easily. They were an absolute shambles of a defensive unit in that game at Anfield back in August, and they're starting to look like they are, for whatever reason, returning to that level, whether it's just a fatigue thing, whether they don't quite have a squad big enough to cope with this many games. They obviously did go through to the 4th round of the FA Cup, meaning that they had that horrible loss against AFC Wimbledon, which has only compounded their woes at the moment. You know, conceding 4 goals to a team that is bottom of League One. And bear in mind, this wasn't West Ham's B team. They only made 5 changes from the team that played against Wimbledon to the team that played against Wolves last time out. So it wasn't like they were just playing the kids. They were playing the kind of players that you'd expect to play against us, and they were absolutely woeful. So they're pretty poor defensively, and I think as long as Liverpool are on their game, as long as we look to just pull their defence from side to side, break the lines quickly, get in between the lines as well, then I think we could cause them real problems. I think one thing we've got to watch out for is the fact that Fabianski has been a solid goalkeeper for them this season, and this is the kind of game that suits him, the kind of game where he's got to make a lot of saves, where he's going to be called on constantly. It was a similar situation when they played Wolves last time out, and it took Wolves until the 66th minute to score, even though they then went on to win the game 3-0. They had like 20 shots or something like that, 9 on target, and they were all pretty decent chances and decent shots as well. So Fabianski is a goalkeeper in form, and I think Liverpool have got to watch out for that, because there's every chance that we need 5 clear-cut chances to actually get a goal in this game if West Ham's goalie is on their game. And of course, the one thing that we will all be thinking about between now and when those lineups are announced at 7 o'clock on Monday is whether or not Marko Arnautovic will start. He went off injured against Wolves. It seemed like he might be out for potentially up to a month or something like that. I think it was an ankle problem that he ended up with. However, Pellegrini has been saying that he's coming back a lot quicker than expected, and he might even play this game, which is obviously bad news for Liverpool fans, because we'd rather he didn't play, because, you know, he can be a pest. And the thing we've got to worry about there is, even if West Ham play poorly, Arnautovic is the kind of player who can dig them out of a hole. We saw when they played against Brighton a couple of weeks ago at the London Stadium, they were woeful. They were 2-0 down. They weren't linking up at all. And then suddenly Arnautovic gets 2 goals in the space of 2 minutes and brings it back to 2-2. That's the kind of thing we've got to watch out for. So obviously all eyes will be on those team sheets when they come out at 7 o'clock to find out whether or not Arnautovic will play for West Ham against us, because I think that will have a huge bearing, potentially not on the result, but certainly in terms of how the game is played and the balance of power between the two teams. And I think one thing we do just have to watch out for is that West Ham, as bad as they are, they've got enough quality players, certainly in that final third with, you know, Antonio, Nasri, Felipe Anderson especially, who of course plays down our right hand side, so they will look to get the ball to him as often as possible, because he can target Milner, he can target Matip. That is the weaker side of our defence at the moment by far. We saw it against Palace when both Townsend and Wilfried Zaha both targeted that side and tried to get as much joy down it as possible, and did pretty well when they did so. West Ham are going to try and do the same, so we just got to make sure we don't let them go through the gears, because as bad as they have been in games like against Bournemouth, they still had a couple of good spells in that game where they did start to switch it on, when the attacking players started to link up, and they could have even gone 1-0 up before they ended up going 1-0 down and then 2-0 down and eventually losing the game. So we've got to watch out for that kind of thing, and I think game management is so important, and that's why Liverpool can send out a really strong message in this game, because if we do win, it probably won't be because West Ham were poor. It will be because we managed our way through the game and we made sure we kept them suppressed, we kept their attack under wraps at all times. I'd back us to do that, provided certain players don't have poor games. I think it's important that Milner and Matip get all the help they can get. It's why I want to see a Fabinho and Henderson midfield, because I back them to kind of maintain the tempo that they want the game to be played out at. And then, of course, we just need our attackers to do the business at the other end. So I'd back Liverpool for a win. How exactly we're going to win, I have absolutely no idea. It could be a scrappy 1-0. We've got a reputation for scoring 4 goals against West Ham. We've scored 4 past them in our last 4 games against them. So it could be another thrashing. It could be 4 or 5-0 or 4-1 or 5-1 or something like that. I'd love it to be that. But if I had to put money down on one result, I'd say probably 2-0 Liverpool, maybe 3-0 Liverpool at best. So that is how I think the game is going to go down. Let me know how you guys think the game is going to go down in the comments below. Apart from that, thank you very much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, hit the like button down there, hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days as well. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I will be back on Monday evening after we've hopefully beaten West Ham to keep that lead at the top of the Premier League. Until then, bye for now.